I was sitting on my porch watching the October sun dip below the tree line when I saw Brenda Morrison stomping up my driveway, clipboard in hand and fury on her face. That's when I knew my peaceful evening was about to go straight to hell. "Mr. Kensington," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "We need to talk about your road maintenance obligations." I set down my coffee and stood up, already feeling the tension creep into my shoulders. Brenda was the president of the Willowbrook Estates HOA in rural Vermont, and she'd been a thorn in my side since I bought my property 3 years ago. The thing was, my property wasn't actually part of Willowbrook Estates. My 5-acre lot sat at the end of a long private road that happened to connect to their development, but legally, I owned that entire road from the county highway all the way to my front door. "What can I do for you, Brenda?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. She stopped at the bottom of my porch steps, her sensible shoes planted firmly on the gravel. "It's about the snow removal for this winter. The HOA board voted last night, and we've decided that since your private road provides access through our community, you're responsible for maintaining it. We've hired Mountain View plowing services, and they'll be charging $2,500 per month from November through March. Your portion comes to $800 monthly." I blinked at her. "Excuse me?" "You heard me correctly." She pulled a paper from her clipboard and held it out. "This is your invoice for the first month. Payment is due by November 1st. I descended the steps slowly and took the paper from her hand. It was professionally printed on HOA letterhead, complete with an itemized breakdown of costs. My name, Harold Kensington, was typed at the top along with my property address. "Brenda, I don't know what you think is happening here, but I own this road. It's private property. It's on my deed." Her lips pursed into a tight line. "The road connects to the community entrance. Several of our residents use it as a shortcut to the highway. Therefore, it falls under HOA jurisdiction for maintenance purposes." "That's not how property ownership works," I said, keeping my voice level despite the anger bubbling up inside me. "This road is mine. I maintain it. I pay for the gravel. I handle any repairs. And frankly, your residents shouldn't be using it at all. It's private property." Brenda's face flushed red. "Are you refusing to pay?" "I'm telling you that I don't owe you anything. This bill is invalid." She snatched the paper back from my hand. "We'll see about that. The HOA has legal authority over community infrastructure, and if you refuse to cooperate, we'll pursue our options. Good evening, Mr. Kensington." She turned on her heel and marched back down the driveway, her sensible heels crunching angrily on the gravel. I watched her go, shaking my head. This was going to be a problem. I could feel it in my bones. The next morning, I called my lawyer. Thomas Brennan had handled the closing on my property, and he was familiar with all the legal particulars of my land. I explained the situation while sitting at my kitchen table, looking out at the 2-lane private road that wound through the trees for nearly half a mile before reaching my house. "They can't do that," Thomas said immediately. "You have clear title to that road. It's explicitly listed in your deed as part of your property boundaries. The HOA has no jurisdiction over it whatsoever." That's what I thought. But Brenda Morrison doesn't seem to care about little details like property rights. Thomas sighed. "She's been a problem before. I've dealt with her on behalf of other clients. She has this idea that the HOA can override actual law if she votes on it hard enough. So what do? For now, document everything. If she sends you more bills, keep them. If anyone from the HOA contacts you, keep records. Don't pay them a dime. And if they escalate, call me immediately." I thanked him and hung up, hoping that would be the end of it. I should have known better. 3 days later, I came home from my job at the engineering firm in Burlington to find a notice taped to my front door. It was another HOA document, this time informing me that I was in violation of community bylaws and that a lien would be placed on my property if I didn't pay the snow removal fee within 10 days. I pulled out my phone and took a picture before removing the notice. Then I called Thomas again. "They're threatening a lien," I told him. "They can't put a lien on property that isn't part of their association," Thomas said, but I could hear the concern in his voice. "However, that doesn't mean they won't try. I'm going to draft a cease and desist letter tonight. We'll send it certified mail tomorrow." "Should I talk to Brenda?" "Absolutely not. Don't engage with her at all. Everything goes through me now." That weekend, I was working in my garage when I heard vehicles coming up my road. I walked outside to see a massive plow truck rumbling toward my house, followed by Brenda's white Lexus SUV. I stood in the middle of the driveway, arms crossed as they approached. The plow truck stopped about 20 feet away, and a burly man in a fleece jacket climbed out. Brenda emerged from her Lexus, that clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. "Mr. Kensington," she called out, "this is David from Mountain View Plowing. He's here to survey the road for winter maintenance." "No, he's not," I said flatly. "This is private property, and neither of you have permission to be here." David looked uncomfortable, glancing between Brenda and me. "Madam, if this is private property—" "It's community access," Brenda interrupted. "The HOA has contracted your services, and we need you to assess the scope of work." I walked up to David, ignoring Brenda entirely. "I'm the property owner. This road is listed on my deed. The HOA has no authority here, and I'm asking you to leave." David rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, buddy, I don't want any trouble. The lady called me, said she represented the HOA, and offered me a contract. If there's a dispute about property ownership, I need to stay out of it." "Smart man. So, there's no dispute. I own this road. You're welcome to verify that with the county clerk's office. My name is Harold Kensington, and the deed is public record." Brenda stepped forward, her face scarlet. "You can't just refuse community services. We're trying to help you." "I didn't ask for help. I don't want your help. And if you don't leave my property right now, I'm calling the sheriff." "This is ridiculous," she sputtered. "You're being completely unreasonable. Everyone in Willowbrook contributes to community maintenance." "I don't live in Willowbrook," I said, pulling out my phone. "I live on my own property, at the end of my own private road. Now you have 30 seconds to leave before I make that call." David was already climbing back into his truck. "I'm out of here. Madam, you can call my office if you want to discuss this further, but I'm not getting involved in a property dispute." The plow truck executed a careful three-point turn and headed back down the road. Brenda stood there for another moment, trembling with rage, before stalking back to her Lexus. She slammed the door hard enough that I worried for her window. As soon as they were gone, I called Thomas and told him what happened. "That's trespassing," he said. "I want you to put up signs, big ones. Private road, no trespassing at the entrance where your road meets the community. And I'm going to push that cease and desist letter through faster. This woman is out of control." That Monday, I took a personal day and drove to the hardware store. I bought 3 large signs and metal posts, then spent the afternoon installing them at strategic points along my road. The main one went right at the junction where my private road split off from the Willowbrook Estates entrance. It was impossible to miss, bright orange with bold black letters declaring, "Private road, no trespassing owner, permission required." I was hammering in the last post when I heard a car approaching. I looked up to see a silver Honda Civic pulling up beside me. A woman in her 30s rolled down her window, looking apologetic. "Hi," she said. "I'm sorry to bother you. I live in Willowbrook, and I've been using this road to get to Route 7. Is that not okay?" At least she was polite about it. "This is my private property," I explained. "I own this entire road. You're welcome to use the main Willowbrook entrance that goes the other way." Her face fell. "But that adds 15 minutes to my commute. I've been using this route for almost 2 years. I understand, but I never gave anyone permission. The fact that other people have been trespassing doesn't create a legal right for you to do it." She bit her lip. "Could I maybe pay you for using the road? I'd be happy to contribute to maintenance." That caught me off guard. It was a reasonable offer, and she was being respectful about it. But I shook my head. I appreciate the offer, but no. If I let one person use it, then I have to let everyone. And right now, I'm in the middle of a legal situation with the HOA. I need to keep this road private. "Is this about Brenda Morrison?" she asked, lowering her voice. "You know her?" The woman laughed bitterly. "Everyone knows Brenda. She tried to fine me $500 because my garbage cans were visible from the street for more than 4 hours. Never mind that the trash company didn't show up until noon. She's awful." "That tracks with my experience." "Well, good luck. I hope you win. Most of us in Willowbrook can't stand the HOA board, but we're stuck in the community. At least you're free of them." She gave me a sympathetic smile and executed a careful turn to head back the way she'd come. I finished installing the sign and headed home, feeling slightly better. At least some people were reasonable. The cease and desist letter was delivered on Wednesday. I knew because Thomas called me at work to tell me. The letter was received and signed for this morning, he said. I made it very clear that any further harassment, threats, or trespassing would result in legal action. I also included copies of your deed showing clear ownership of the road and documentation that your property is not part of the Willowbrook HOA. Think that'll stop her? Thomas was quiet for a moment. Honestly, I doubt it. People like Brenda Morrison don't respond well to being told no, but at least we're building a clear record of her behavior. He was right. That Friday evening, I came home to find a new notice on my door. This one informed me that the HOA had filed a complaint with the county about my obstruction of community access routes and that my signs were creating a safety hazard. I called Thomas immediately, my hands shaking with anger. They did what? Filed a complaint with the county about my signs blocking community access. Thomas made a disgusted noise. That's completely frivolous. The county has your deed on file. They know that's your private road. But I'll reach out to the county administrator first thing Monday morning and get this cleared up. In the meantime, do not remove those signs. Monday came and went without incident. Tuesday morning I was eating breakfast when I saw flashing lights coming up my road. My heart sank. A sheriff's deputy was pulling up to my house. I went outside, coffee mug still in hand. The deputy, a young guy with a serious expression, got out of his cruiser. "Morning, officer. What can I do for you?" "Are you Harold Kensington?" "That's me." "I'm Deputy Chen. I'm here about a complaint filed by the Willowbrook HOA regarding blocked access to a community road." I took a deep breath. "Officer, that complaint is false. This is my private road. It's on my deed. The HOA has no jurisdiction over it and never has. They're harassing me because I refused to pay them money for snow plowing services I didn't request on property I own." Deputy Chen looked back at the road, then at my signs. "Can I see your deed?" "Absolutely. Come inside. I have copies." I led him into my house and pulled out the folder I'd been keeping with all my property documents. I showed him the deed, which clearly outlined the boundaries of my property, including the entire length of the road from Route 7 to my house. Deputy Chen studied it carefully, then took a photo with his phone. "This is pretty clear. You own this road." The HOA president, Brenda Morrison, has been trying to claim jurisdiction over it. She sent me bills, threatened liens, brought a plow company onto my property without permission, and now she's filing false complaints. The deputy's expression hardened. "Filing a false complaint is a crime. I have a lawyer handling this, Thomas Brennan in Burlington. He sent the HOA a cease and desist letter last week." Deputy Chen nodded slowly. "I'm going to document this and file my report with the complaint number. I'll note that you have clear legal ownership of the road and that the signs are legally posted on your own property. The complaint will be closed as unfounded." "Thank you, officer." "I'd suggest you talk to your lawyer about pursuing harassment charges if this continues. The sheriff's office takes false complaints seriously. They waste our time and resources." After Deputy Chen left, I called Thomas and updated him. "Good," he said. "That actually works in our favor. We now have law enforcement documentation that you're the legal owner and that the HOA is filing false complaints. I think it's time to escalate this." What do you mean?" "I mean, we go on offense. I'm going to draft a formal complaint against Brenda Morrison and the HOA board for harassment, trespassing, and filing false police reports. If they want to play games, we'll show them what real legal consequences look like." That Saturday, I was working on winterizing my house when I heard shouting coming from the road. I walked down my driveway to find Brenda Morrison arguing with a couple in their 50s who I recognized as Willowbrook residents. "The signs are illegal," Brenda was saying, her voice shrill. "He has no right to block community access." The man, tall with graying hair, saw me and called out, "Is this your property?" "It is," I confirmed, walking over. Brenda whirled on me. "You need to remove these signs immediately. I have residents complaining that they can't use this road." "Good," I said. "They shouldn't be using it. It's private property." The woman, blonde and tired-looking, held up her hands. Look, we're not trying to cause trouble. We've been using this road because Brenda told us it was a community throughway. If it's private, we'll stop. Thank you for being reasonable, I said. Brenda's face was purple now. I am the HOA president. I have authority over this community's infrastructure. You have authority over Willowbrook Estates, I said, keeping my voice level. You have zero authority over my property, and if you continue to harass me, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. You can't threaten me. That's not a threat. It's a fact. This is the third time you've come onto my property without permission after being explicitly told to stay away. That's criminal trespassing in Vermont. The couple exchanged glances and started backing toward their car. We're going to go, the man said. Sorry for the confusion. They drove off, leaving me alone with Brenda. She was breathing hard, her clipboard now bent in her white-knuckled grip. You're going to regret this, she hissed. Is that a threat? It's a promise. The HOA board voted to pursue legal action against you. You'll be hearing from our attorney. Good. My attorney will be happy to respond. And while we're talking to lawyers, you should know that mine is currently preparing harassment charges against you. The sheriff's department is already aware that you filed a false complaint. That's a crime, Brenda. Her confidence faltered for just a moment. I didn't file a false complaint. This road is community property. No, it's not. The county has my deed. The sheriff's department has verified my ownership. You're wrong, and you're going to face consequences for this harassment. I turned and walked back toward my house. Behind me, I heard her car door slam and her engine start. Gravel sprayed as she accelerated back down the road. Monday morning, Thomas called me. I just received a letter from an attorney representing the Willowbrook HOA. Want to guess what it says? That I need to remove my signs and pay them money? Close. They're demanding that you grant them an easement for the road and that you pay them for back maintenance fees for the past 3 years. I laughed in disbelief. They're demanding I pay them for maintaining my own road? Apparently, they've been including the cost of snow removal for your road in their annual HOA budgets. They claim they've spent approximately $6,000 over the past 3 winters plowing it. Thomas, I plowed my own road. I own a truck with a plow attachment. I've never asked them to touch it, and I've never seen their plow service on my property. That's what I thought. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to request documentation from them proving they provided these services, dates, times, invoices from their plow company. If they can't provide proof, we'll demonstrate they're making fraudulent claims, and then we're going to file a countersuit for harassment, trespassing, and extortion. Extortion? They're trying to force you to pay money you don't owe by threatening legal action and liens. That's attempted extortion under Vermont law. The first snowfall came in mid-November, earlier than usual. I woke up to 4 inches of fresh powder and spent an hour clearing my road with my truck. It was peaceful work, watching the snow push aside under the plow blade, the morning sun glinting off the white landscape. I was finishing up near the entrance when I saw a Willowbrook resident slow down and watch me. He rolled down his window. You plow this yourself? He called out. Always have, I confirmed. Huh. Brenda told everyone at the last HOA meeting that the association was paying for your snow removal, said you were freeloading off community funds. My jaw tightened. She's lying. I've never asked the HOA for anything, and they've never plowed this road. The man nodded slowly. I'm starting to wonder what else she's lied about. She claimed we needed to increase HOA dues this year because of rising maintenance costs. But if she's making up expenses for your road, what else is inflated? You might want to ask for an audit of the HOA finances, I suggested. He looked thoughtful. We might just do that. Thanks. That evening, Thomas called with an update. The HOA's attorney sent over their documentation. It's interesting. How so? They provided invoices from Mountain View Plowing for your road. Problem is, I called Mountain View. Remember David, the guy who came out with Brenda? Yeah? He kept detailed records. He documented that he never serviced your road because you informed him it was private property. These invoices are fabricated. I felt cold. They're committing fraud. Yes, they are, and it gets better. I requested the HOA's financial records through their attorney. They're required to provide them since they're claiming you owe money. The records show they've been billing residents for snow removal on your road for 3 years. collecting money for a service they never provided. How much money? About $12,000 total, $200 per household over 3 years for the private road maintenance fund. I sat down heavily. Brenda Morrison has been stealing from her own HOA members. That's what it looks like. I've already contacted the Vermont Attorney General's office. This falls under their Consumer Protection and Fraud Division. They're going to investigate. What do I need to do? Keep doing exactly what you're doing. Document everything. If anyone from the HOA contacts you, refer them to me. And if you see anything suspicious on your property, call the police immediately. When people get desperate, they do stupid things. 2 days later, I came home from work to find my driveway blocked. Someone had piled logs across the entrance to my road, right where it split from the Willowbrook entrance. They were too heavy to move by hand, and my truck was on the other side of them, at my house where I'd left it that morning. I called the sheriff's department first, then Thomas. Deputy Chen arrived within 20 minutes. "When did you leave this morning?" he asked, walking around the logs. "Around 7:30. These weren't here." "And you own this entire road?" "All the way to my house, about half a mile up." Deputy Chen took photos and measurements. "This is criminal mischief and possibly illegal restraint if they're blocking your access to your property. Any idea who did it?" "The HOA has been harassing me for weeks. My lawyer can provide you with all the documentation." "Brenda Morrison? You know her?" The deputy almost cracked a smile. "We've responded to calls involving her before, disputes with neighbors, mostly. She has a reputation." 2 more deputies arrived, along with a sergeant. They helped me move the logs to the side of the road, and the sergeant told me they'd be investigating. "We'll check for cameras in the area," he said, "and we'll be having a conversation with Mrs. Morrison." That conversation must have happened quickly, because less than 2 hours later, my phone rang with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "You called the police on me?" Brenda's voice was barely controlled hysteria. "I called them because someone blocked my road. That's a crime." "I didn't touch your precious road." "Then you have nothing to worry about. The sheriff's department will investigate and figure out who did it." "This is your fault. If you had just cooperated from the beginning, none of this would have happened. You're tearing this community apart." "I'm not part of your community. I never have been. And you've been stealing from your own residents by charging them for maintaining my road when you never did any work here." There was a long silence. When Brenda spoke again, her voice was different, scared. "I don't know what you're talking about. The fabricated invoices from Mountain View Plowing, the $12,000 you collected from residents. The Attorney General's office is investigating. You should probably talk to a lawyer, Brenda, a criminal defense lawyer." She hung up. The next morning, there was a sheriff's cruiser parked at the Willowbrook entrance when I left for work. Deputy Chen was there, along with the sergeant from the night before. "Morning, Mr. Kensington," the sergeant called out. "We reviewed the security footage from one of your neighbor's homes. It shows a white Lexus SUV stopping at this entrance yesterday afternoon. A woman matching Mrs. Morrison's description is seen dragging logs across your road entrance." "So it was her." "We'll be filing charges for criminal mischief and unlawful obstruction. She's being served with a summons this morning." "Thank you, Sergeant." He nodded. "For what it's worth, we've had our eye on the Willowbrook HOA for a while. There have been multiple complaints from residents. This situation with you might be what finally brings some accountability." Over the next week, everything accelerated. The Attorney General's office launched a formal investigation into the HOA's finances. Thomas filed our civil suit against Brenda Morrison and the HOA board for harassment, trespassing, attempted extortion, and fraud. Several Willowbrook residents reached out to me, apologizing for unknowingly using my road and asking if they could provide statements about Brenda's behavior. The biggest development came on a Tuesday morning. I was at work when Thomas called, barely able to contain his excitement. "Harold, you need to sit down for this." "I'm already sitting. What's going on?" "The Attorney General's office did a deep dive into the HOA finances. It's worse than we thought. Brenda Morrison has been embezzling funds for 4 years. The fake invoices for your road were just the tip of the iceberg. She created shell companies for various services and maintenance contracts. The companies don't exist. She's been paying herself." "How much?" "Almost $150,000. I let out a low whistle. "That's serious prison time." The AG is bringing criminal charges, theft by embezzlement, fraud, falsifying business records, and because she filed that false police report about you, they're adding that too. She's looking at potentially 10 years in state prison. What about the rest of the HOA board? The other board members claim they didn't know. The AG is investigating them too, but it looks like Brenda kept the finances tightly controlled. She was the only one with full access to the accounts. That evening, I watched from my porch as police cars rolled into Willowbrook Estates. I couldn't see details from my house, but I later learned that Brenda Morrison was arrested at her home. Several Willowbrook residents called me to give me the details, their voices mixing shock and vindication. The next few months were a blur of legal proceedings. Brenda's criminal case moved through the system while our civil case proceeded separately. The HOA board, now under new leadership, actually apologized to me and confirmed that they had no claim to my road and never had. They were dealing with their own crisis, trying to recover the stolen funds and rebuild trust with residents. In February, Brenda Morrison pleaded guilty to multiple felonies as part of a plea agreement. She was sentenced to 7 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA. Her attorney had apparently advised her that going to trial would likely result in an even longer sentence. Our civil case was settled in March. The HOA's insurance paid me $50,000 for the harassment and emotional distress. Brenda personally owed me an additional $25,000 for the trespassing and attempted extortion, though Thomas was frank that we'd probably never collect much of that given her financial situation. Through it all, I kept living my quiet life at the end of my private road. The new HOA board installed proper signage at the Willowbrook entrance directing residents to use the correct exit. The trespassing on my road stopped completely. Several residents went out of their way to introduce themselves properly and apologize for the situation. On a warm evening in April, I was back on my porch with my coffee when a car pulled up. It was the woman from the silver Honda, the one who'd been using my road as a shortcut. She got out and walked up holding a bottle of wine. "Hi, I don't know if you remember me." "I do, from last fall. I'm Diane Thompson. I live in Willowbrook, and I wanted to thank you. Because of what happened with you, the whole HOA fraud came to light. A bunch of us are getting refunds. I'm getting back almost $2,000 that Brenda stole. I'm glad something good came out of it." She held out the wine. "This is for you. It's not much, but I wanted you to know that a lot of us are grateful." Brenda made everyone's life miserable. She handed out fines for everything, created rules that didn't make sense, and apparently stole from us the whole time. You didn't have to fight back like you did, but you stood up for yourself and it exposed everything. I took the wine, touched by the gesture. "Thanks, I was just protecting my property." "Maybe, but you did more than that. The new board is actually reasonable. They're reviewing all of Brenda's rules and fines. They hired an independent auditor. Things are actually getting better." After she left, I sat on my porch and opened the wine. It was a nice vintage from a California winery. I poured a glass and looked out at my road, winding through the trees in the fading light. Thomas had called me a few days earlier with the final financial accounting. Between the settlement money and the reimbursement of my legal fees, I'd actually come out ahead. The money was nice, but it wasn't really what mattered. What mattered was that I'd stood my ground. When someone with a clipboard and an inflated sense of authority tried to bully me, I'd said no. I'd done my research, knew my rights, and refused to be intimidated. The legal system worked the way it was supposed to, slowly but surely. The truth came out. The criminal faced justice, and I got to keep living my life in peace. I thought about Brenda Morrison sometimes, sitting in a cell somewhere, probably still convinced she'd been in the right. People like her never really understood that rules applied to them too. She'd thought her position as HOA president gave her unlimited power, that she could make up whatever rules she wanted, and people would just comply. She'd been wrong. The next morning, I woke up to fresh snow. Another late spring storm, not uncommon in Vermont. I climbed into my truck, attached the plow blade, and spent a peaceful hour clearing my private road. My road. Every foot of it legally mine, properly documented, and finally free from harassment. When I got back to my house, there was a message from Thomas on my phone. The final settlement check had arrived at his office. He'd have it ready for me to pick up whenever I was in Burlington. I made coffee and breakfast, then settled into my home office to work. Through the window, I could see the cleared road stretching away through the snow-covered trees. It was beautiful and quiet and mine. That afternoon, I drove into Burlington to pick up the check. Thomas's office was in a restored brick building downtown, and his paralegal greeted me warmly. "Mr. Kensington, Thomas is finishing up a call. He'll be right with you." I sat in the waiting area, looking at the framed diplomas and legal certifications on the walls. 5 minutes later, Thomas emerged from his office, grinning. "Harold, come on back." His office was organized chaos, legal documents stacked neatly on every surface. He pulled an envelope from his desk and handed it to me. "50,000 from the HOA insurance, minus my fees as we discussed. That's 35,000 to you. Not a bad outcome for standing up to a bully." I looked at the check. It was surreal, seeing that many zeros. "I got another call this morning," Thomas continued, "from the Vermont Attorney General's office. They wanted me to pass along their thanks. Apparently, your case opened up investigations into 3 other HOAs around the state. Turns out Brenda Morrison wasn't the only petty tyrant embezzling from homeowners." "Glad I could help, I guess." Thomas leaned back in his chair. "You know what the real victory is here? You didn't let them make you doubt yourself. So many people in your situation would have just paid the money to make the problem go away. They'd have questioned their own deed, their own rights. But you knew you were right, and you held firm. I had a good lawyer. You had clear property rights and the documentation to back it up. I just made sure everyone else recognized that. But the fortitude to stand up to Brenda Morrison and her clipboard of doom, that was all you." We talked for a few more minutes about the case's aftermath. The new Willowbrook HOA board was apparently implementing massive reforms. They'd reduced dues, eliminated many of the ridiculous rules Brenda had imposed, and hired a professional management company to handle finances with proper oversight. As for Brenda herself, she was in the Women's Correctional Facility in Chittenden County. Her husband had filed for divorce. Her adult children weren't speaking to her. She'd lost everything because she couldn't accept that her authority had limits. I left Thomas's office and walked through downtown Burlington, the check safely in my wallet. The spring afternoon was warming up, snow melting in patches, revealing brown grass underneath. Students from the University of Vermont were out enjoying the weather, sitting on benches and walking in groups. I stopped at a local bookstore and browsed for a while, buying a few novels I'd been meaning to read. Then I grabbed lunch at a small cafe, sitting by the window and watching people pass by on the sidewalk. It was funny how normal everything felt now. For months, the situation with the HOA had dominated my thoughts. Every time I came home, I'd tensed up, wondering what fresh harassment awaited me. Every phone call made my stomach drop. But now it was over. Really, truly over. My phone rang as I was finishing lunch. Unknown number, but I was in a good mood, so I answered. "Mr. Kensington, this is Jennifer Walsh. I'm the new president of the Willowbrook HOA board." I tensed despite myself. "What can I do for you?" "Nothing at all," she said quickly. "I'm calling to apologize on behalf of the entire community. What Brenda Morrison did to you was unconscionable. You weren't even part of our HOA, and she harassed you, stole from residents using your name, and created a nightmare situation. I wanted you to know that the board reviewed all of her actions and were horrified. We've put measures in place to make sure nothing like this ever happens again." I appreciate that. I also wanted to let you know that we've updated all our maps and documentation to clearly show that your road is private property. We've informed all residents that it's not to be used as a cut-through. And if you ever have any issues with trespassing from anyone in Willowbrook, please contact me directly. We'll handle it immediately. It was a gracious call, and I told her so. After we hung up, I realized I was smiling. That's what good leadership looked like. Taking responsibility, making changes, and treating people with respect. I drove home slowly, enjoying the scenery. Vermont in early spring was beautiful in its own way, the landscape caught between winter and renewal. Patches of snow fought against determined greenery. Streams ran high with meltwater. The air smelled clean and full of promise. When I turned onto my road, I paused at the entrance. My signs were still there. Private road. No trespassing owner. permission required, but now they felt less like a defensive barrier and more like a simple statement of fact. I drove slowly up to my house, admiring the work I'd put into the property over the past 3 years. The garage I'd built myself, the garden beds ready for spring planting, the sturdy porch where I spent so many evenings watching the sunset. This was my place, my home, and nobody could take that away from me. That evening, I called my brother in Portland. David had been following the whole saga with a mixture of amusement and concern. "So it's really over?" he asked. "It's over. Settlement check is in my wallet, charges were filed and stuck, and the new HOA leadership actually seems competent." Man, I can't believe that woman thought she could get away with it. Fabricating invoices, stealing money, harassing you. What was she thinking? She was thinking she was untouchable. That's what happens when petty authority goes unchecked for too long. David laughed. Well, she found out different. 7 years in prison. That's serious time. She earned it. We talked for another hour, catching up on family news and making plans for him to visit in the summer. After we hung up, I realized how good it felt to have a normal conversation again, one that didn't revolve around HOA drama and legal battles. The next few weeks passed peacefully. Spring properly arrived. I planted my garden with tomatoes, peppers, and herbs. I pressure washed my deck and repainted the trim on my garage. I took long walks on my property, down my road, enjoying the solitude and the birdsong. In May, I got a call from a reporter for the Burlington Free Press. She was doing a story on HOA fraud in Vermont and wanted to interview me. I thought about declining. The case was over, and I'd moved on. But then I thought about all the other homeowners out there who might be dealing with similar situations. People being bullied by petty tyrants with clipboards. People doubting their own property rights because someone in a position of authority told them they were wrong. I agreed to the interview. The reporter, a sharp woman named Rachel, came out to my property on a sunny afternoon. We sat on my porch, and I told her the whole story. She recorded everything, asked thoughtful questions, and took photos of my road and the deed documents I'd kept. What would you say to other homeowners dealing with HOA overreach? She asked. Know your rights. Get your deed. Understand exactly what property you own and what authority the HOA actually has. Don't just accept what they tell you, and get a good lawyer if you need one. It's worth the investment to protect your property and your peace of mind. Do you think HOAs serve a valid purpose? I considered that. I think they can if they're run properly. Maintaining common areas, organizing community events, preserving property values through reasonable standards. But they need oversight and accountability. When one person has too much power and no one questions them, you get situations like mine. Or worse. The article ran a week later. It was fair and thorough, laying out the timeline of events and the eventual criminal charges against Brenda Morrison. It mentioned the Attorney General's investigation into other HOAs and quoted a state senator who was proposing new legislation to increase transparency in HOA finances. I got emails and calls from people around the state thanking me for speaking out. Some shared their own HOA horror stories. Others just wanted to express support. It was overwhelming but gratifying. One email in particular stood out. It was from a man in Rutland who'd been fighting his HOA over a similar property dispute. He'd been close to giving up, but my story had motivated him to keep fighting. He hired a lawyer, pulled his deed, and proved that his HOA had no authority over the disputed area. He thanked me for showing him it was possible to win. That email made everything worthwhile. All the stress, the anger, the legal fees, the months of harassment. If my experience helped even one person stand up for their rights, it was worth it. Summer arrived properly. My garden flourished. I spent my weekends maintaining my property and my weekday evenings relaxing on my porch. I saw fewer cars from Willowbrook on the main road near my entrance. The residents had clearly accepted that my road was off limits. In July, I got a letter from the Vermont Attorney General's office. It was a formal thank you for my cooperation in their investigation. They'd recovered nearly $500,000 in stolen HOA funds across 4 different communities. 12 people were facing criminal charges. Legislation was moving through the State House to require annual independent audits of all HOAs in Vermont. Change was happening, real, meaningful change. and it had started with me refusing to pay an $800 invoice for services I never requested on property I owned. One evening in late August, I was sitting on my porch when I saw a car pull up to the entrance of my road. It sat there for a moment, and I tensed, wondering if I was going to have another confrontation. Then the car turned around and drove away. I realized I'd been holding my breath. Old habits died hard. Even though the legal battle was long over, part of me still expected trouble. But no trouble came. Not that day, not the next week or month. Life just continued, peaceful and quiet, exactly the way I'd wanted it when I bought this property 3 years ago. In October, almost exactly a year after Brenda Morrison first stomped up my driveway with her clipboard, I was back on my porch watching the sunset. The trees were brilliant with fall color. The air was crisp and clean. Everything was perfect. My phone rang. It was Thomas. Hey, Harold, just wanted to give you a heads up. The $25,000 judgment against Brenda Morrison personally? Her lawyer just filed paperwork indicating she'll be making payments from prison. It'll take her years, but you'll actually get that money eventually. Honestly, I'd forgotten about it. Thomas chuckled. That's because you've moved on. That's healthy. But I figured you should know. Justice can be slow, but it does happen. After we hung up, I thought about everything that had happened. A year ago, I'd been facing down an angry HOA president who thought she could bully me into paying for services I didn't need on property I legally owned. I'd been stressed, angry, and uncertain about how things would resolve. Now, Brenda Morrison was in prison. The HOA she'd controlled was under new, competent leadership. Homeowners across Vermont were getting their stolen money back. Legislation was being passed to prevent future abuse. And I was sitting on my porch, on my property, at the end of my private road, completely at peace. The legal system had worked. Property rights had been upheld. Criminals had faced justice. And an ordinary guy who just wanted to live quietly on his own land had won against someone who thought their position made them untouchable. I raised my coffee mug in a silent toast to property deeds, good lawyers, and the importance of standing your ground when you know you're right. The sun set behind the trees, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Down the road, my private road no trespassing signs stood as quiet sentinels. Not defensive barriers anymore, just statements of simple fact. This was my road, my property, my home, and that was exactly how it was going to stay. The end.